Good evening, everyone. My name is Hemanshi, and as it was mentioned, I have, by qualification, I have a Master's of Engineering in Chemical Engineering. But by passion and by chosen profession, I'm an educator and an edupreneur, because of which I started my organization, Young Stripes, as the founder and CEO. So Young Stripes is a STEM outreach and leadership development initiative at raising the aspirations and life chances of young Kenyans. And today, the topic that I've chosen to talk about is Red is Sus, taking it from a very popular online game during the pandemic called Imposter, wherein you are all a part of a crew on a ship in the outer space, and you have to complete tasks before an imposter crewmate tries to kill you all. So Red is Sus was very popularized for people of my age, and Sus stands for suspect. Yeah, suspicious. And before I start, I'm the kind of person that really likes to interact, so we've all sat for really long. I would like everyone to stand up. And some of us will not like it at the end of this because you'll be standing till the end. So as I present, if anything rings true for you, please just have a seat, right? We'll see who's standing on until the end of the talk. So, has anyone heard of the word imposter syndrome? You just give me your hands if you've heard of these words, right? Imposter syndrome, by definition, is something that high-achieving individuals often feel about themselves, wherein they cannot accredit their competence or their achievements to their competence. And this constantly creates a persistent fear of being caught, right? You're an imposter in your mind. And there are some characteristics that are very closely linked with having this sort of symptoms. So one is self-doubt, fear of not living up to the expectations, either yours or others. There is the inability to realistically assess your own competence or your skills. You could be competent, you just don't know about it. There's the attributing your success to external factors. So often you'll hear people say, oh no, it was just luck. I was in the right place at the right time, or these things just came to me without having to work for them. There's the common habit of berating your own performance, right? Constantly telling you can do better. I mean, yeah, you cracked a $1 million deal, but you know, it wasn't your success to celebrate. There's overachieving. There's sabotaging your own success. And more importantly, it's setting goals so high that when you get disappointed, there's this genuine fear of being caught as a liar. And so I was the poster child all through my life of imposter syndrome. If you can see there, that was the bare number of trophies that I came home with on any given prize day. And from school all the way to university, I was the person who would do everything, right? You say sports meets, you say debates, you know, anything. And that does prove by my dark circles, which I have layers and layers of makeup to hide, is I didn't sleep because I was achieving so much. And I take this picture at university as a memento of what I did there. So I was in the library 24 hours a day, if possible, sleeping there, eating there, studying there, reading there, even doing 4 a.m. yoga stretches. Yeah? So I spent my life trying to overachieve because of a lot of reasons. And when it comes to imposter syndrome, there are multiple types of imposter syndromes. And this has been theorized by Dr. Young, who talks about 5 types of imposter syndromes. What the funny part is, at any point in my life, I experienced at least one out of those 5. So we'll take a journey through my life while talking about these, and if anything rings true for you, just have a seat. So the first type of imposter is the perfectionist, right? So this is, you have to be good 100% of the time. And that was, right, so that was me, right? In school, because I was compensating for the fact that things were not so good at home. Because things in my house were 100% wrong, the rest of my life had to be 100% right. And so I started, enrolling onto everything, spending every hour that I could out of my house. And what that made me is what I call the crown prince, right? You set such high levels of expectations for yourself that when you fail, you have self-doubt. And 90% is not enough 99% is not enough. 99.9% is not enough. Because when you don't do 100%, you're still a failure in your eyes. And so, if anybody has ever been called a control freak here, yeah, this was me in school. I was known to be like, this has to be done. You can't put 3 dots where there's meant to be 4. You know, everything had to be on point. And when you want to know if you're that perfectionist of an imposter, ask yourself these questions. Have you ever been accused of being a micromanager? Have you ever had great difficulty delegating, and when you delegate, you do not trust that the person will deliver as per your expectation? Wow, everyone's almost down. We have a few. That's just type 1, right? And then, have you ever accused yourself of not being cut out for a job? That's the perfectionist. And it took a lot of time, but I learned how to overcome that. I'm still learning, but I learned at least a good way. So the first one was never attributing my success to anything external, believing that success is not the only definition of progress, is what I learned the hard way. I learned to celebrate small achievements, right? And I'll tell you this, I got a smartwatch recently, and my only achievement this whole year, I can say, in my eyes, was I made my steps every day for a very good number of days until I didn't. So I started cultivating that to avoid any burnout. I tap myself every time I drink 2 liters of water in a day, because that's a small achievement that I'm proud of daily. And then I learned to take my mistake in strides. You know, mistakes are a natural part of learning, is something I did not grow up knowing, because you had to present this image of being this perfect child that I was not, and I knew I was not, but I was trying to prove I was. And lastly, I learned to act before I am ready. Not to mean that I will present something shoddy, but to tell myself if the deadline is Tuesday, midnight 11:59 is good enough to submit that assignment, or you will be so late at submitting that it won't work out for you. So that was great, right? A child who was really beating themselves up became a bit better. And I thought so until I went to university. So I was one of those fortunate people who, because of my great merits in academics, which I tormented myself for so long, had the opportunity to study abroad. I got 2 merit scholarships to actually go to the University of Sheffield. And then what do I do when I go there? I start criticizing myself. I try to be the superhuman. What I learned there was my education in Kenya was only theory-based. I knew formulas in a textbook. I knew what the mitochondria was. I knew the common phrase, it's the powerhouse of the cell. That's it. But when you told me to come and build something, I was like, okay, so how do we do this now? And that sort of made me feel like I was actually masquerading as an intellect amongst really smart people. And that, you know, the child who was always at the top of the class now went away and hid in a corner thinking I could not be better than anyone else in this world. And so I started to overcompensate for it. Right? I was convinced that I was a phony, so I started to get validation from working and overworking. So I had 7 part-time jobs at a point. I was in leadership development programs. I was, still doing a full-time degree abroad and sleeping 4 hours a day for 4 years of my life. And that really did mess up my mental and physical well-being. But I was so busy being busy that it took me 2 years to discover I had anxiety and depression in the first place. And that's why I call this superhuman imposter the workaholic, okay? And at this point, I love to talk about to the women in the house especially. We all see this image, on Women's Day, on Mother's Day, on any celebration where we're celebrating women, and we go like, yes, we're multitaskers, we're awesome. But that image really infuriates me because what it celebrates is overworking and over-expecting. You heard a lot of the other speakers talk about how aside from being this amazing young professional in their business, they still had to go home and do all the chores. They still have to go home, look after the babies. You're still the cook, you're still the nurse, you're still the maid. You're all of that. So your job is just 9 to 5 is job A, and everything after that you do home is job B, C, D, and E. And that really frustrates me. And so what did I learn was, first of all, identify for you, was I trying to be the superhero that I am not? What was my kryptonite? Was I always out, in the office, or in my case, in the library for hours after all my teammates have gone home? Yes. Did I stress about working and completely hate downtime? 100%, until date. Like if I'm sitting free for 1 hour, my brain's like, you should be doing something. And I'm just constantly anxious about it. And I'm sure a lot of young people can relate to that, because as a society, we celebrate overworking so much, right? Has anybody here heard the phrase, sleep is for the weak? Yeah, sleep is for the weak. Yeah, there we go. So that's a popular phrase in my generation. Sleep is for the weak. We're gonna be up till like 4 a.m., drink 5 cups of coffee an hour, but get through it. And then before we're 40, we're all like having back problems. What I learned as well was I started to put my hobbies and passion aside for work. I loved sports. I was a great swimmer. That's something I've enjoyed my whole life. I did nothing. I bought gym membership. Gym was 5 minutes away from my house. Only reason I bought it was they had a swimming pool. Made it like 5 days a whole year. And my hobbies did slide away from me. And I constantly kept asking myself, when I was president of the Women in Engineering Society, when I was leading a stakeholder engagement project that would influence 2.2 million pounds worth of funding for another organization, I was like, so really, can you lead? Are you a good leader? Are you really capable of being in this position? Or are you just pretending and these people have not realized yet? And so I learned to be my own sidekick. The beautiful part about being a sidekick is your hero is the best hero in this world. So imagine if you became your own sidekick and you hyped yourself up every single day. How would that look like? So first of all, I started veering away from external validation, right? I don't need someone to come and tell me I am good. I started telling myself, hey, Hemanshi, you are good. And that's how I started developing my own confidence. I started believing in my competence and in my skills more when that validation came from inside, not from outside. The second thing was to take constructive criticism very seriously, but never personally, right? If someone came and told me, you're a micromanager, I didn't go like, how dare you? I'm trying to make this job perfect. Instead, I diverted that into, okay, something is not right. It's not working for my team. How can I change this? Because this is big. So when you take constructive criticism seriously and not personally, that changes the way you interact with the people around you. And on that point, something to always remember is there is a difference between criticism and constructive criticism. For me, if someone's criticizing me in a non-constructive way, it's just a one-way stream, in through here, out through there. And I learned that the harder way. The second is to create boundaries, and this is especially for those people as young as we are, or we're starting as young entrepreneurs. There is no distinct boundary, and the pandemic has revealed that even more, right? Now that you're home, your boss expects you to work 9 to 12 even. At midnight, they'll be like, yeah, but where are you going? It's curfew. And that's why I celebrated that curfew was lifted and I could go out for ice cream at 10 and not expect myself to work even more beyond certain times. So as an entrepreneur, we often forget that we have to create those distinct boundaries. So I sometimes have to force myself, of course, to not get up at 10, but maybe at 8, and start work at 8 and finish at 5, and literally not even try and have a thought about work until the next day at 8. And that's hard. But create those boundaries, because otherwise, like me, you will take your work to the swimming pool as well. And tell the truth, right? Being vulnerable is one of the best things in this world if you are in a safe space. So find those safe spaces where you can be vulnerable. Remember this, it will not matter whether you are Iron Man or Spider-Man, whether you are Wonder Woman or Superman. You got into that league based on your merit. Celebrate that and work on your competence. You are there because of your competence, not because of luck. The third type that I became was the soloist, and this happened dramatically and I'd say suddenly or overnight for me was after I graduated. Having learned that STEM education in Kenya was just theory-based, and I suffered so much to prove my worth at university. Upon graduating, I made that decision. I said, I could get a job. I could easily get a job and do a lot of things in the UK that I wouldn't have opportunities for here, but I decided to come back to Kenya and start Young Stripe so that no other child in the future, hopefully, will have to go through the struggle that I did. I wanted to bring practical learning to every classroom. And I became the soloist because I had a point to prove. When I came from the UK, I was condemned a lot by a lot of peers and a lot of people, well-wishers, I'd say, that how are you leaving opportunities there to come back to Kenya? And at some point, especially with the pandemic, everything slowing down, those words began to ring true. The soloist is what I call the silent sufferer, in my words, because you feel like only you can do the job right. For me, it became true because if I asked for help, it sounded like I was weak. I became of that mindset that asking for help equaled being weak. And so I refused assistance. And sometimes I call these people the pseudo-independentists or pseudo-independent people, because we always go like, I don't need anyone. I will do this. I will be the CEO and I'll be the CFO and I will deliver the class as a teacher and I'll be the cleaner of my office and all of that together. While yes, you have to be there, especially as a young business which has no finances, you also have to learn to ask help. Maybe somebody can write a better financial statement than you, and there is no shame in asking for that help. So I learned to be unabashed. I learned to be very unashamed of asking for help, because there's 3 things I learned as a young entrepreneur. The first one was seeking advice does not mean you're incompetent. It just means that you value someone else's opinion a lot more. Right? You can seek advice and not follow through on it, but it will give you a different perspective or a different dimension. The second thing was to get a mentor. Being able to get knowledge from somebody else is equally as important as imparting that onto someone else. So when I got a mentor, I realized that getting feedback was not a signal of insecurity. I didn't feel insecure when someone tells me, you haven't done this right. But rather it showed me that my ego is less important to me than the learning process. And lastly was, that asking for help is not a display of weakness, but a display of strength, because it takes a lot to go and tell someone, can you tell me how to improve myself? Because I can't see how I can improve myself. And so throughout these, last 10, 15 years of my life, there was one imposter that I most resonated with, was the expert. And the expert came at the cost of crippling confidence in myself from all these mental health issues that I was facing. The expert is the person whose motto is, Google is my middle name. I must know everything before I do anything. And these are the people I call the false negatives, because they give you the false impression, or you give yourself the false impression that you are not competent. And because we put most of our importance on what we know and how much we know about it, it creates a lot of hurdles for us. So for example, has anybody in this audience ever shied away from applying from a job because when you look at that checklist, you couldn't tick all the boxes? Yeah? Statistics actually show that men will apply to a job if they meet 60% of the criteria, but women will still try and get 100% of it, right? The next thing is you're constantly just trying to get yourself better, right? I'll do this course and this course and this course, whether or not it's relevant to my field. I will try to learn that all. And it happens. And so you keep going, even after all that, you go do I know enough? Am I worthy enough? And how I learned to overcome it, or how I am overcoming it in my process, first of all, is knowing that too much information is a thing. Google has unlimited storage space, your mind does not. Okay, taken too far, the tendency to seek endless knowledge or to endlessly seek out more information can become a means of procrastinating. I had started this at the start of the pandemic. When I came back from university, I had a checklist. I'm going to learn Chinese, I'm going to learn Korean, I'm going to swim, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to run a business. The only thing that has happened in that is I have one qualification in Korean at an entry level, and I have done a bit well in my business so far. I then also started to practice just-in-time learning, which means keep your resources. It's good. Know that I can learn Chinese here, or I can go and learn about financing there, but I don't need to do it now until I need it. When I started the thought of teaching kids coding, I did not know how to code. I learned how to code when the time came where I had to teach someone to do it. In the last last thing that was very critical was, while I was being mentored by someone, I started also mentoring other people. I go to forums like this, I go to events, I talk to young people about careers, about entrepreneurship, only because that gives me the confidence that even if I know 1% out of 100, that 1% is changing somebody's life. And that is enough competence for me to move ahead in what I'm doing. So the one type of imposter I never related to in my life was the natural genius, right? I know you're all going to be like, she's just being a fad. The truth is, I was really good at a lot of things. But very early on in my life, I learned that it came at a cost of hard work. It didn't come to me naturally. The one person I knew that came naturally was my next door neighbor, my brother. This kid, I swear to God, would wake up in the morning, go for his exam without any preparation, come back with 100. Have never seen him touch a book. He finishes all his homework in class. I've never seen him studying at home, but he comes with great grades. And that's the person we all know as the neighbor's child. You know, we have all our parents going like, you should be like this one's kid. You should be like this neighbor. So this is where they set high, very, very high targets for themselves. What I didn't know was my brother himself was struggling with something, but it just didn't come out because he himself was not recognizing. And he said that he identified specific skills that he was not good at. So if it was swimming, was it a specific style of swimming that he was not good at? And he works on that rather than dismissing a whole idea on its own. And the last thing that stuck with me incredibly that he sent me was, failure is sometimes a prerequisite for certain parts of your life to succeed and to grow. So failure is a great prerequisite for learning. And I'm going to get through this very quickly because this, we've discussed about these 5 types of imposter syndromes. We've all identified we have some of it. So where does it come from? Anybody in the audience would just like to take a wild guess without reading the slide? So the first one is your childhood environment, where you grew up, the ideas and the values that you grew up with, the pompousness or the caring or the overprotection in which you grow really does matter. The second is your personality traits, right? There are some people who are nitpickers by personality, and that's fine. You just need to learn how to moderate it. There are those people who already have low self-esteem, and there are those people who have a high score on neuroticism. They are commonly known to have this constant battle with imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is a constant battle between who you see yourself as and what the world sees you as. And then there's poor mental health. And this is the most interesting aspect of imposter syndrome, is that most people that suffer with imposter syndrome tend to, or for prolonged suffering, they tend to have also experiences in depression and anxiety. But when you already have depression and anxiety, you already have slow self-esteem. So when you get into the cycle of being an imposter, right, in your mind, you're getting into this vicious cycle of poor mental health that's very difficult to get out of. And some people have actually taken this one step further and gone on to say that, imposter syndrome on its own, the word imposter syndrome, is enough to tell you that something is wrong, because the word imposter implies deceit. It implies being cheating or manipulating. And the word syndrome itself, we always associate it with an illness. It's not an illness. It's just a condition in which we are not seeing ourselves for who we are. One of the biggest factors applicable to imposter syndrome is actually biases. Research has shown that women and people of color actually suffer more from imposter syndrome than the rest of the world. And this is simply because being aware of you being in a special category, right, is very different. Knowing that I'm a girl, I knew I had to prove I was better than the boys in my class. Knowing that, you're a person of color who has this heritage of oppression, you have to prove yourself better. We've all read these stories about how the most invested companies in Africa are owned by people away from the continent, external people, white people. But Africans with so much potential are not having those fundings and those opportunities. Just knowing that there is an implied bias against you pushes you to work harder and feel you're less deserving. And so how do you overcome imposter syndrome? I've talked about all the categories and how to overcome it. I could just put that in a few quick bullet points from what I've learned. First, identify which type you are. Yeah, I knew that at different stages in my life I had different types, and there are different ways to tackle it. So get on it and get head on with it. The second is to name the feeling. You know, everyone suffering from imposter syndrome will not feel the same feeling when they're not in the right place. Is it anger? Is it disappointment? Is it shame? Is it anguish? Is it the fear of constantly getting, your mask removed off? The third is do a reality check. You need to constantly challenge your assumptions. If you're assuming you're not good enough, make a list of what makes you capable enough. When you're applying for a job, think about, can I tick these boxes? Yes. Can I tick those? Yes. The ones you can't, can I improve on that rather than dismissing? Can I learn these things on the job? And will there be opportunities for me to learn those on the job? And when you can't make that list, call your friends and call your family, because they will show you who you truly are, because they are more proud than you will ever recognize. And then celebrate your success. Take credit for your efforts. And in my house, I'm known as the non-humble person now, because anytime I make the smallest discovery, I'll run into my living room and go, I'm a genius. Today I've accomplished this. It's not to get into my head, but to get away from my own thoughts of not being competent enough. Talk about it. Today we've seen everyone sat down. So clearly we're not the only ones suffering. The more you talk about it, the more help you'll get, the more support system you'll get. We say it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a world to support an adult. Yeah. Accept failure, look at it as an opportunity to learn and reflect on yourself. Resist the urge to self-deprecate. And as Kenyans, as from where I come, like the Indian community, we're told be humble. When someone praises you, go like, no. When you have achieved something, be proud of that achievement. I love that in Kenya, moms like to be called Mama this and Mama that, Mama Hemanshi and this. They're like, I birthed this child. I will take so much praise in myself for giving this child a life that I will be called by that child's name. So when someone tells me, oh, Hemanshi, you're the founder of Young Stripes, I say, yes, I am. Thank you for acknowledging that. I'm trying my best at it. And the last thing is, don't be afraid to see a therapist, because yes, while we have all these struggles and there is this stigma around imposter syndrome, around mental health and all these things, sometimes we're not our best friends. And when we're not our best friends, we need someone else to give us that perspective. And sometimes it can't be our family because they are dealing with their own things. So I am a big advocate for therapy. I have gone through a good chunk of my life having therapy, which has been a result of being able to, I said I had all these problems in my life and then I've accomplished all this, is simply because I had someone there to unwind the thoughts in my mind. And that's what the therapist does. So I'm going to cut it there. I hope you've taken something out of this. I hope that the young entrepreneurs here are inspired to continue despite the struggles. And yeah, I'm around if you need any more help. Thank you.